Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Makings of an RPG. For those of you who don't know, I recently moved back to New Zealand after living in Australia. I had to ship my PC across the ditch, and it ended up taking a fair bit longer than I'd hoped. Because of that, there's been a delay on this video, so thanks for being patient, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Today we're making an AoE spell and implementing pathfinding for our enemies, so that they can chase the player around a room containing various obstacles. Last episode we made some big combat improvements, but at the moment the player's options in a fight are fairly limited. All you can do is run away from enemies, dodge spells, and click non-stop until everyone is dead. I want to add some more skill elements to the combat so it feels more exciting and players are incentivized to get better at it. With this in mind, I knew that adding new spells was my next priority, so I got to work on brainstorming some new spell ideas. My game takes place in a fictional universe I created, and I've written 2 books about, which meant I already had some source material for a reference. That being said, not all spells in the books would translate appropriately into the game. Eventually, I came up with the idea of a rising tendril that would ascend from the ground to impale enemies within a small radius. Unfortunately, I was pretty unhappy with how my first attempt at animating the tendril turned out. I decided to create a placeholder animation that could show the area of effect without being too detailed. This meant that I could get on with coding the mechanics without spending days trying to make the spell look nice. This spell operates a bit differently from the projectile spells we currently have in the game. It has its own special spell type called Ground Spell, and when it's cast, an animation will play at the target location. Once that animation is finished, a collider will activate for 1 frame. Any enemies inside that collider when it activates will take damage. Here's the Rising Tendril placeholder in-game. I feel like a boss. Once I thought the new spell was in a good place, I knew it was time to work on enemy pathfinding. The levels in my game won't all be empty rooms, walls and other environmental objects will get in between the player and the enemies. With the current way the game is set up, enemies walk in a straight line towards the player, which means they will get completely stuck if even the slightest obstacle blocks their path. Luckily for me, there are some pretty awesome pathfinding libraries out there already. The one I'm using is the most popular one for Unity, and is actually pretty easy to get set up with. Once I'd imported the package to my project, all I needed to do was set up a navigation grid and attach a few scripts to some game objects, and we were in business. Of course, it's never quite that straightforward, and I ran into a few issues that I had to solve before I was happy with how the enemies were acting. One of the main ones was the navigation grid. The navigation grid is a grid that the Pathfinder uses to figure out which parts of the map it can walk on and which parts are walls. The graph is made up of nodes, which are all the points it will consider walking on. If there aren't enough nodes, the grid will be less detailed, and it might not pick up on the edges of a wall. If that happens, a Pathfinder could think a wall is actually the floor and get stuck trying to walk in it, like in that last clip. Increasing the number of nodes in the graph makes it more accurate, but lowers performance, so it's a trade-off. In my case, it was the right call to bump up the node count a bit, as my game still runs pretty smoothly. Now the Pathfinder can detect walls much more accurately, and will no longer try to walk through them. This has been another episode of Makings of an RPG. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, leave a like and a comment down below for any feedback you may have. The next episode will be out within a week. Until then, peace out.